Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. In 1981, a film by the name of Enter the Ninja was released in theaters, riding on the back of mainstream interest in martial arts films at the time. The film follows Cole, a mercenary trained by ninjas, attempting to thwart Venarius Industries, the villainous company forcing Cole's old war buddy to sell his land so that they may profit from the oil deposit hidden beneath it. Enter the Ninja starred renowned Italian actor Franco Nero as Cole, and Japanese actor Sho Kosugi as rival ninja Hasegawa. Though the film itself was negatively received by critics, Kosugi's performance as Hasegawa left a massive impact, as his work directly led to ninjas becoming immensely popular in 80s pop culture. Ninjas were everywhere, with a variety of ninja-themed merchandise becoming the hot new thing, extending from movies, toys, and of course, video games. The most influential of these ninja video games was Sega's Shinobi series. The original Shinobi was a side-scrolling hack-and-slash, created in 1987 for arcades, and spawned a slew of sequels for Sega's family of consoles. The Shinobi franchise was huge, and once upon a time was one of Sega's flagship series. Though it receives nowhere near the love from Sega that it used to, its most recent release having been in 2013, Shinobi remains the longest-running ninja video game series of all time. It remained largely 2D until 1995, when the rest of the big-name video game franchises were making the shift to 3D. Sega began developing a 3D Shinobi title for Dreamcast, but due to the system being discontinued, the game was pushed to the PS2, which brings us to the topic of today's video. Simply titled Shinobi with no additional subtitle, the game was developed by Overworks and released in 2002, with a sequel coming just a year later in the form of Nightshade, or Kunoichi in Japan. These titles were notable for leaning heavier toward graphic violence, being the only Shinobi games rated M for mature, as opposed to T for teen, as well as being Sega's first and only attempts at a fully 3D Shinobi game. How well did the series make the transition? Equip your stealth suit, have your blade at the ready, and let's turn the page to Shinobi and Nightshade for the PlayStation 2, starting with Taking place in modern-day Tokyo, we follow the story of the ninja Hatsuma. Hatsuma is the head of the Oboro clan, earning the position after being forced into a ritual with his older brother, Moritsune. The ritual was a duel to the death to decide who would become the next leader of the clan, as well as the wielder of the cursed sword, Akujiki. After a long battle, Hatsuma succeeds in slaying his brother, an act that forever haunts him. 4 years later, an earthquake hits Tokyo, bringing forth a golden palace in the center of the city. The appearance of the palace marks the return of Hiruko, a powerful sorcerer sealed away by the Oboro clan long ago. Hiruko summons demons known as Hellspawn, devastating Tokyo and all but annihilating the Oboro clan. Fueled by a desire for revenge and to save the city of Tokyo, Hatsuma plunges into the fire to slay the Hellspawn and bring an end to Hiruko. Shinobi's plot is pretty basic and unlikely to surprise any of its players with its predictable plot twists. Despite this, it's a competently told story of a ninja putting a stop to an ancient evil, which nevertheless kept me entertained. It's presented with nice-looking CG cutscenes, though its presentation is held back by some fairly wooden voice acting.
The yin of the Hellspawn seems to have abated Akujiki's hunger.
I must save Master Kabuto.
You're hurt.
Our protagonist, Hatsuma, is compelling, as he's more than just your standard stoic ninja. Our hero gets it pretty rough in this story, having been forced to kill his brother, wielding a sword that risks devouring his very soul, and numerous bosses being resurrected Oboro comrades being controlled by Hiruko. Hatsuma is forced to endure all manner of struggles throughout the plot, but he pushes through the pain to do what's right, and I found him to be a very likable guy. It's clear that needing to fight his old clansmen is meant to be more difficult for Hatsuma than it is for the player, as we never get the chance to meet any of these guys prior to the boss fight, so we have no attachment to them before needing to cut them down. Overall, Shinobi's story was perfectly fine. Not remarkable, but not what I'd call poor either. Shinobi takes place in the third-person perspective, letting us always see Hatsuma in his full glory. Hatsuma is a character who is designed to just be the coolest looking dude, wearing a mask with 4 glowing eyes, his kunai strapped to his wrists like spikes, and donning his iconic red scarf. This scarf is comically large, and will likely strike the player as nonsensical for a ninja, but the large, red trail it leaves behind serves the clever purpose of making sure you never lose track of where Hatsuma is. Hatsuma's black ninja outfit can blend a bit with the game's darker stages, which becomes even more difficult to track when in the heat of action. But thanks to the scarf, the bright red puts an instant spotlight on our character and makes him easy to follow. Considering Shinobi is a game about ninjas, you may be surprised to hear that stealth is not an aspect of its gameplay. Instead, each stage is divided between a number of combat encounters and platforming challenges. Hatsuma can double jump, dash once in the air, and attach himself to certain walls to run along them. In combat, pressing the square button will swing his sword, Akujiki, to attack enemies, while triangle will throw a kunai to momentarily stun them. Certain enemies have greater defenses, and can only be attacked from behind. By pressing X, Hatsuma will perform a ninja dash, quickly moving in the direction the player is holding and around enemies. The dash also has the added bonus of leaving behind a blue phantom image that will draw the enemy's attention, providing you a brief window to cut into your foes while they're distracted. Upon defeating an enemy, you'll notice they'll darken and freeze in place for a brief time. If you manage to defeat a second enemy during that window, they'll freeze as well, and your window of time will reset. This serves 2 purposes. First, if you manage to defeat 4 or more consecutive enemies, Hatsuma will perform what's known as a tate, in which he'll strike a pose and immediately kill every enemy on screen. This is necessary to obtain the greatest number of points to raise your score at the end of a stage. Second, Hatsuma's sword will continuously increase in power for every enemy you defeat during a kill streak. This is essential for taking down the more powerful enemies, as they possess substantially higher health and attack than the average mook. Facing one of these foes on your own is challenging, and they will likely shred through a good portion of your HP by the time you bring them down. However, by targeting the weaker enemies around you first, and attacking the larger one before your kill streak is up, your sword will have been powered up enough to defeat them in a few strikes, if not a single hit. As such, identifying the order you should attack each enemy in a group, and doing it quickly enough to keep up your kill streak is the key to victory. Kill streaks are also usable against bosses as well. These can be incredibly hard to pull off. Bosses are continuously attacking and on the move, while the enemies necessary to power up Akujiki will only occasionally spawn around the arena. It's up to the player to decide how they want to tackle each boss. They can attack the boss as normal while ignoring the enemies, or you could choose to play it safe by only killing 1 or 2 grunts before returning to the boss and dealing moderate amounts of damage. However, if you manage to strike the boss with a full kill streak, you will deal devastating amounts of damage with the potential to kill a boss in a single hit. Between defeating every surrounding enemy and striking the boss in such a short period of time, all while the boss moves, blocks, and attacks, accomplishing this is unbelievably hard. But succeeding and watching a boss's full health bar disappear in a single slash? That feels incredible.
I'm just saying, I might be Jesus. I might. I'm not saying for sure, I'm just saying it's a possibility. I might be Jesus.
I adore Shinobi's gameplay. The combat's focus on speed and identifying weaknesses felt wonderfully rewarding, and chaining together enemies to end in a tate never got old to me. Hatsuma felt great to control, both in the heat of battle and during platforming segments, though I found the dash a bit finicky and couldn't always dash around enemies like I'd want to. The camera also became a bit of an issue at points, especially during segments that took place indoors and within narrow corridors, as I found it got stuck on walls and occasionally obscured enemies. Thankfully, by holding the lock-on button for combat, a blue arrow above Hatsuma will point to the closest enemy, and pressing L1 will snap the camera to wherever I was facing, which did help alleviate these issues. Shinobi is regarded as one of the single most difficult games for the PS2, due to a combination of handicaps against the player. First, stages have no checkpoints, and very little in the way of health pickups. If you lose all your health or fall into a bottomless pit, you'll have to replay the stage right from the beginning, with no ifs, ands, or buts. The only saving grace is the game does allow you to start from the beginning of a boss fight if you manage to reach them. Second is your soul-hungry companion, Akuchiki. After completing the first stage, Akuchiki will awaken and begin devouring Hatsuma's soul. The only way to keep this sword satisfied is by feeding it souls, and this translates to gameplay. The red icon by your health indicates how fed Akuchiki is, and is constantly draining by the second. The meter may only be refilled by defeating enemies. Should this meter deplete, Akuchiki will begin stealing your health instead, and won't stop until you fill a portion of the meter again or drop dead.
Here! Right here! All your needs will be met.
I'm hungry!
In a minute!
This is where I found most of Shinobi's challenge comes from. Battles in Shinobi are tough. Not every fight is mandatory, and killing every enemy in a stage only increases your chance of defeat. However, you can't just ignore every battle either, or you won't be able to keep Akuchiki satiated. The player needs to choose their battles carefully, knowing when it's best to run past or to stay and fight, and finding that balance is not an easy task. However, as difficult as Shinobi was, rarely did it ever feel unfair. My deaths either came from botching a timing of a jump, choosing my battles poorly, or getting too overeager to land a tate that I would become reckless and overwhelmed by my enemies. The common factor of each game over was that it was my own fault. I lost because I made a mistake, not because of cheap level design or ludicrous enemy types. The game is challenging, yes, but it's properly balanced around that challenge. You will die a lot, that much is certain, but with each death, you learn a little bit more. You start to understand the best way to dispatch a group, or when an encounter might not be worth the trouble. Each failure is a chance to grow and learn a stage inside out, so by the time you've beaten a level, you don't just have a feeling of accomplishment, but a feeling of mastery. It was a sensation I found few games have been able to replicate. However, I did say it rarely felt unfair. Unfortunately, there is one particular instance where I found the game's tough but fair approach was thrown out the window, and tested my patience as no game had ever done before. Despite it only being one instance in the whole game, this dramatic increase in difficulty was so teeth-crackingly infuriating that it substantially damaged what was otherwise a fantastic game. Let's talk about the final boss. After a long journey, we've conquered every stage, slayed every boss, and ascended to the very top of the Golden Palace, where our final obstacle awaits, Hiruko. I had overcome every other trial. I was certain I could overcome this too. But nothing could prepare me for the absolute spanking Hiruko was about to deliver. If Shinobi was a game of poker with each boss as another player, Hiruko would be the guy who flips the table and shoots us with a gun. When the boss first starts, he's relatively tame, staying in one place while occasionally attacking. However, he has no health bar, and you can only get it to appear by hitting him 6 times, which drags out the fight and makes retrying take that much longer to get into the real battle. Hiruko's health bar is massive, far larger than any boss that had come before him. You can try and whittle down his HP with normal attacks, but this will take an absurd amount of time, making hitting him with a large kill streak essentially mandatory. If you wait a bit, these weak talisman enemies will spawn in, providing you with your opportunity. However, this is far easier said than done. Hiruko is constantly teleporting around the rather sizable arena, potentially moving him too far to reach in time. He's still attacking too, and because he's constantly moving all over the place, it's easy to get blindsided by his attacks, stunning you long enough to break your streak while chipping away at your health. He also becomes completely invincible while he's attacking, meaning even if you manage to get your kill streak, reach Hiruko, and get around his defenses to hit him, he may just become impervious to your damage and render your entire effort null and void. And the final ingredient of this absolute sandwich is that a full kill streak will not kill Hiroko in a single hit, dealing only about 40% of his total health. So after fighting through all that hell and defying the odds to land a hit on Hiroko, you will need to do the same task at minimum one more time with multiple small hits in between, all without any checkpoints. If you die, you do the whole thing over again. It's absolute garbage. While the rest of the game is about learning from your mistakes, there is no feeling of skill involved with the final boss. It feels entirely dependent on luck, to have the stars align and have everything fall perfectly into place to have your chance at victory. And since this is the final boss, this is the last impression you're left with. I didn't feel satisfied or excited to have won, only relief that this horrible ordeal was over, leaving a sour note on an otherwise excellent action game. I've wanted to replay Shinobi plenty of times over the years, only to have that desire killed once I remember what was waiting for me at the very end. That's a shame too, because Shinobi has tons of replay value. Shinobi is not an especially long game. Even accounting for the difficulty and needing to replay entire levels on death, you can expect an average playthrough to take between 4 to 6 hours, though that naturally can vary depending on how much you struggle against certain challenges. However, Shinobi is rife with content to add plenty of additional playthroughs. For starters, you ranked at the end of each stage, encouraging players to perfect them and earn all S ranks. Additionally, after clearing the game for the first time, you'll be able to play as Hatsuma's brother, Moritsune. Moritsune controls the same, but boasts a higher attack power and speed, the trade-off being his Akujiki gauge decreases twice as fast. Finally, each stage has gold medals scattered about. Collecting them all will unlock several EX stages, as well as a playable Joe Musashi, the protagonist of the original Shinobi games. So Shinobi provides plenty of reasons to return to it for those looking to get more bang for their buck. Shinobi was close to being a brilliant game. It provides a tough as nails but fair challenge that is both tense and rewarding, while providing plenty of incentive to keep coming back. It's sadly brought down by a terrible final boss, probably the worst I've ever experienced, which poisons the well. But if you're a player looking to really test yourself against one of the most difficult experiences the PS2 has to offer, Shinobi more than provides. And that's all for Shinobi 2002, but we're not done with tough ninja action yet. Just a year later, Shinobi would get a sequel, tweaking the original's gameplay while providing its own kind of challenge. Let's now turn to Nightshade for the PS2. Just FYI, Nightshade directly follows Shinobi, and as such, my coverage of the story will contain spoilers for the previous game. Please skip to the timestamp on screen if you wish to avoid them. At the end of Shinobi, Hatsuma managed to defeat Hiroko, causing the Golden Palace to collapse. However, aware of the awful power Akujiki possesses, Hatsuma chooses to remain in the palace, destroying himself along with Akujiki. Several years have passed, and it seems the cursed sword isn't quite as destroyed as we would have liked, as the blade remains split apart into several shards. Hoping to claim the shards for themselves, a Japanese corporation known as the Nakatomi Conglomerate breaks the seal on the Golden Palace once more, allowing the Hellspawn to return to Earth. We play as Hibana, a female ninja working for the Japanese government, whose mission is to retrieve the shards of Akujiki before Nakatomi does. Hibana has her work cut out for her, as working for the corporation is Kurohagane, a ninja cyborg, as well as a group of shinobi mercenaries, including Jamushi, Hibana's old mentor. It's a race between the two forces to collect all the shards of Akujiki, with the fate of Tokyo on the line. I feel much the same way about Nightshade's story as I did Shinobi's, which it's entertaining for what it is, and not a whole lot more. The scramble between the two sides collecting the shards was decent, and I enjoyed watching Hibana's interactions with the shinobi mercenaries. Unlike Hatsuma, Hibana brings much more attitude, constantly snarking at her competition and superiors alike, letting her stand out a bit more than our previous hero. I did find her catchphrase, "this just isn't my day," got old really fast. It made Hibana come across as a little whiny at times. Still, Hibana is every bit as cool as Hatsuma was, and I found them equally as appealing. She's also much easier on the eyes, due to her white costume, which stands out better against the environments than Hatsuma's. The one edge Nightshade's story had over Shinobi's was the cyborg Kurohagane and your final encounter with him, which left me asking plenty of interesting questions. Spoilers for the end of Nightshade. Kurohagane acts as your rival throughout the game, the Virgil to your Dante, facing off against the player 3 times. In the first encounter, Kurohagane is a silent robot, and he is quickly defeated at the starting level. Later, we fight him a second time, and in the cutscene, he's developed the ability to speak, albeit in a very limited capacity, only capable of saying Hibana's name, but he still doesn't leave all that much of an impression. In the third and final encounter, Kurohagane obtained all the shards of Akujiki, and here's where I found myself becoming fascinated with the character. In the cutscene before our final battle, he has spontaneously developed sentience, now speaking full sentences and possessing knowledge about the sword his corporate creators wouldn't have. Kurohagane had no time between our previous encounter with him to receive such a dramatic upgrade, so where's the sudden sentience coming from? Was it granted by Akujiki, or was Akujiki speaking through him? Then there's his final form after restoring Akujiki, which bears an uncanny resemblance to Hatsuma. Was this just a coincidence? Did Kurohagane choose this form for himself, or was it Akujiki's doing, still having some remnant of Hatsuma's soul imprinted on it? What kind of implications does this have? We don't get any answers to these questions, and sadly, due to poor sales, Nightshade never received a sequel, meaning these will likely forever remain mysteries. I'm probably thinking way too much into this, as the rest of the story has nowhere near this level of nuance, but intentional or not, it left me reflecting on the story after the game was finished, so credit where it's due. Nightshade's gameplay builds off the previous title, and so the gameplay remains similar, consisting of stages filled with combat and platforming, and ending on a boss fight. Hibana has the same maneuvers as Hatsuma, including performing tates, so if you've played Shinobi, you'll feel fairly comfortable right out the gate. Hibana has a few unique techniques of her own, such as kicks, which can break through enemy shields and armor and deflect missiles, I guess? She also attacks with her daggers, which substitutes damage for larger combos and building up her chakra gauge. The chakra gauge allows Hibana to perform a charge attack. Though it takes a moment to unleash, it fires 3 long-range projectiles that do huge amounts of damage on their own, and can be paired with kill streaks to become even stronger. On the whole, Nightshade's combat is much more forgiving than Shinobi's. For starters, Hibana doesn't have Akujiki, and as such doesn't need to worry about her weapons draining her health, taking a massive burden off the player's shoulders. I found enemies less aggressive too, being much easier to chain and achieve a tate. Speaking of tates, a meter is now visible, showing how much time you have left before a kill streak expires, which is a very welcome visual. Perhaps the biggest inclusion is stages now have multiple checkpoints throughout, so players won't need to restart straight from the beginning should they fall near the end. Retrying from a checkpoint will cause you to suffer a penalty during the stage ranking, but I was pretty much only getting C ranks anyways, so using checkpoints was hardly going to make my score much worse. Though Nightshade is an easier game thanks to these factors, that doesn't mean it's not difficult. Bosses still pack a hell of a punch, and where combat has been made easier, the scales tip to make platforming harder in exchange. Nightshade is filled with scenarios requiring the player to chain together enemies over bottomless pits, on the whole having much more do-or-die moments than Shinobi. The biggest example was its final stage, which is a marathon. Still, Nightshade has a stronger endgame, without any instances that felt like they leaned on the side of luck like Shinobi's final boss. In fact, I think Nightshade's final boss kicks ass. A complete playthrough of Nightshade feels rewarding without any huge roadblocks, so between the two 3D Shinobi, Nightshade is the game I find myself replaying more. It's also more newcomer friendly, having a difficulty selection of easy and beginner to help ease players into its otherwise brutal difficulty. Of course, those wishing for an experience similar to the previous game still have the normal difficulty, with a hard mode being unlocked after finishing normal. Clearing the game for the first time unlocks one of the bosses, Hisui, as a playable character, who has a quicker movement speed than Hibana and fights using her parasol. If you beat the game on normal and have a cleared save data for Shinobi on your memory card, you can also unlock Hatsuma, complete with Akujiki and its soul-stealing mechanic, providing that original challenge returning players may have been looking for. Finally, Joe Musashi is once again playable upon collecting every gold medallion in each stage. Collecting these medallions also unlocks a multitude of other stages along the way, which come in multiple varieties. Time attack, survival, and EX stages that require the player to perform specific actions to succeed. When taking into account all these additional stages and playable characters, Nightshade eclipses Shinobi when it comes to content, and provides plenty of reasons to come back for more. When put side by side, Nightshade is often viewed as the lesser of the two titles, and I do understand why that is. While Shinobi's combat absolutely kicks players' asses, it was also more exciting for that very same reason. It also had tighter level design, with Nightshade having entire stages where you just fight enemies in a single location, which comes across as uninspired. Finally, Nightshade having a multitude of enemies with shields and armor that must be hit with a kick adds an unnecessary extra step, which doesn't actually feel like it contributes anything meaningful to combat encounters. With all that in mind, it's easy to see why Shinobi is the more favored of the two. While it may be because I still check under my bed in fear of Hiruko, I prefer Nightshade just a sliver more. I found myself engaging with the story more with Nightshade, and all the content plus 4 playable characters makes it very inviting when I'm looking for something to do. I do share the sentiment of the levels and combat being weaker in Nightshade, but I don't find that it's such a downgrade that it offsets everything else I like about it. When it came time to bring the Shinobi series into 3D, Sega delivered magnificently. These games certainly aren't for everyone, considering just how relentless the difficulty can be, but there are also no other games like it, and considering Sega's recently announced Shinobi game seems to be returning the series to its 2D roots, there likely will never be another game like it. If you're someone really hoping to test yourself, I would strongly recommend giving both these titles a shot. You may find yourself a new favorite that keeps you coming back for more brutal ninja action. Shinobi will ninja dash all the way to the number 21 spot, sneaking past Ultimate Spider-Man for the GBA. Nightshade will make it just a bit higher, right behind Way of the Samurai 3 at number 18. And that's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like and maybe sharing it with your friends. Anything helps to push my videos out there. Which of the 3D Shinobi titles was your favorite? And which protagonist do you prefer, Hatsuma or Hibana? Hibana had the better personality, but I think I prefer Hatsuma just for his color scheme and personal story. Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to stick to the end of the video to see which game our randomizer will be selecting for the next video. In the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.